Welcome to the Strategic Travel Entrepreneur. My name is Rita Perez. Hello. I've been a travel advisor for over 10 years and am navigating this winding road of entrepreneurship with you. I created this podcast because I wanted to share all the things I've learned from leaders both in and out of our industry that I really wish I would have known way back then. But alas, the important thing is I'm aware of them now, and I want you to be too. Ready for this week's show? Let's jump in. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode. I am really excited to have you here today because we have a pretty interesting topic that I know some of us have talked about like in different conversations with each other about neurodivergency. I have also mentioned my battles with my own autoimmune disorder and how I kind of have to adjust how I travel now. And I was diagnosed back in 2007, but I have to adjust how I travel now because I am symptomatic, where before it was just a label that I didn't really ever use, but I have a special diet. And I think it's important to talk about these types of things because we don't talk about them enough, because many of us are able-bodied and we don't have any hindrances to us. But there are a lot of people, whether it's a physical disability, an emotional disability, a medical disability that you can't see, that we have to adjust things and how we travel based on that. But the travel world really isn't built to adjust how we travel, the ones with us with special needs. And so we have a really special guest with us today. Her name is Dawn Barclay, and she has tons of experience within the travel industry. She has written a book on this very subject matter, not only to help parents and people who do travel with people like myself, but also to help you as travel entrepreneurs. If this is a niche that you are looking to get yourself into, how can you help families that are dealing with people who are a little bit neurodivergent? And how can you help them in their travel planning and to prepare for different things that come up during the process? So without further ado, hello, Dawn. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Rita. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being on. Now tell us a little bit more about your background in the industry and this new book that you've written and that has come out recently.
Terrific. I grew up the daughter of two travel entrepreneurs who owned Barclay Travel Limited and later opened a division called Barclay International Group, short-term apartment and villa rentals. This was preceding by many years Airbnb and all of these other companies, VRBO. We were one of the pioneers. So I was in sales and marketing for that company. And then I branched into trade reporting. So I was with Travel Agent Magazine as a senior editor. I was with Travel Life, which was put out by Whittle Communication and backed by American Airlines. That was a great publication. I was with Travel Market Report, covering meetings and incentives. And I'm currently the contributing editor for special needs and family travel for Insider Travel Report. The book, which I started writing back in the early 2000s and actually finished now, thanks to the pandemic, is called Traveling Different: Vacation Strategies for Parents of the Anxious, the Inflexible, and the Neurodiverse. And what I found, which will be interesting to your listeners, is that the special needs travel tips can work for any family because every child is anxious and inflexible when they're taken out of their comfort zone. And what is less of being in your comfort zone than traveling?
Right. And could you even say that even if you didn't have an official diagnosis, but do suffer from anxiety, that this could be helpful?
I think it can be helpful to any family that has any children, because it never hurts to do the three things that I advocate in the book. The book is full of strategies more than destinations. There are destinations, but that makes maybe 15, 20% of the book. So the three things that you really have to learn yourself and to be able to convey to your traveling clients is how to introduce the concept of travel to children and start small, how to prepare, and the hint is that you can never over prepare, and how to build a child-centric vacation so that everybody on the trip is happy. So I talk about those things and I break it up by type of transportation, then type of accommodation, and then touring and special interest itineraries.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So what I've kind of branched out a little bit on how this kind of like affects me, my autoimmune disorder. What kind of inspired you? What's a little bit about your story, the backstory of how this book came to be?
Well, like I said, I was born into travel. I've been traveling since I was 2. When I had my children, they were not as fond of travel as I was, and they had issues that prevented them from really enjoying travel. So that's why part of the book is called The Anxious, the Inflexible, and the Neurodiverse. So I was looking for a book like this and it didn't exist. I started interviewing back in the early 2000s. I started interviewing people such as Dr. Tony Atwood, who's big in autism. I interviewed Dr. Ellen Littman, who's very big in the ADHD world. And then I kind of hit a stumbling block because there were not a lot of people I knew how to find. And the internet was not as varied and diverse as it is now. And so it wasn't until the organization called IBCCES created the Certified Autism Travel Professional designation, which is something your listeners should really look into if they're interested in going into this niche, that I knew how to write the book, because I interviewed those great agents who have really taken time to learn this specialized niche. And many of them are special needs parents themselves. And they introduced me to their clients who wanted to speak to me. And I was able to, with the help of 2 years worth nowhere to go, was able to finish the book.
Yeah. I mean, there were so many passion projects that came out of the past couple of years.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important, especially to focus on people that do have invisible disabilities. So why would that be something that a travel entrepreneur should kind of scale down on? Like, what would entice them to kind of get into this world?
Really good question. So 1 out of every 44 children is born onto the autistic spectrum.
Wow.
And that does not include children with mood and attention disorders like ADHD and bipolar. And so an interesting thing came up when IBCCES did a survey of 1,000 special needs families. And of those, 87% don't travel. But of that 87%, 93% would travel if they knew where to go and what to do. That's where the book comes in, and that's where your listeners can come in, because if they learn, how to counsel these clients and perhaps buy them the book or read the book and use that information, they'll be able to enlarge. If somebody comes to them and has a child on the spectrum, they'll be better versed in how to help them.
Right. I'm a big person that, like, when you are going to be advertising or marketing to a specific niche, you need to be talking to what their problem is, not just saying, I specialize in people and families that have to deal with invisible disabilities.
Yeah.
So when we're talking on that, what kinds of problems or what kinds of questions, like when you say that 93% of these families would travel if they knew how to do it, what are the problems that they're seeing or that's coming up?
The number one problem that people are scared about is they're afraid their children is, autism is a sensory disability.
Right.
And they're scared that if their child has a sensory meltdown and has a tantrum in public, people are going to judge them. They're going to judge them as parents. They're going to judge the child, and they don't want to deal with that. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know where to go to work with venues like hotels and restaurants and museums that are trained to work with them. The same group, IBCCES, does certification for venues as well. So there are theme parks and hotels and actually whole tourist boards and museums and anything you can think of that have gotten this designation, and they've been trained in how to work with this population. And if you've had the training or you have the book, you'll know where to guide them. And they'll come to you for that help as opposed to doing all the research themselves. But sensory issues, you have to know where to send people where there might be sensory maps. So they'll know what theme park to go to, where maybe there are low sensory areas with less people quieter areas, museums with low lighting, or afternoons that are specifically for people on the spectrum. All that sort of information is really important. I mean, at SeaWorld, for example, there are signs that will tell you beyond this point, this is how it's going to smell. So you can decide with your child, is feeding the seals really worth the smell? And so at least it gives you some empowerment.
I was just going to ask, when you say sensory, and if somebody's having or being overwhelmed with senses, what exactly does that mean? So that's pretty neat that you pointed out that even like smell can affect somebody with these invisible disabilities.
Yeah, it's not only that, it's fluorescent lighting, it's crowds, the chaos of crowds. Just imagine if you were a little kid and you go to the airport for the first time and you're seeing these strange people going through these strange machines and taking off their shoes and the conveyor belts and all the things that you have to deal with. And there are programs that you can guide your clients to, such as Wings for Autism, which will let them do a trial run of the airport before their actual flight.
What?
Yeah, there are certain airports with sensory rooms. So there's a quiet place to go in the airport. Okay. There's an organization called TSA Cares that will, where it's offered, it will assign someone to you that can help you get through the airport with less hassle. All these things are available to you if you know that they exist.
I'm slightly mind blown. Yeah, I didn't even know that existed. Yeah. I've heard of sensory rooms. So if somebody needs to calm down, like from the different lights or get away from people, that they can go there to calm down. But I didn't even know, like, to do a practice walkthrough through an airport.
Yeah. And there are airlines that will actually take you on tours if you ask. And your certified autism travel professional knows all this, and you can be counseling your clients. You can also be reading my column, which is not only is it in Insider Travel Report, but I have a website that's backing up my book called travelingdifferent.com. Okay. And I do original content on there. So I recently did a story like, how can you tell if the tour or cruise is really autism friendly?
Right.
Or another one was about a company called Becoming, I'm trying to remember what it is. It was about, it's a Becoming Rentable. And it's about a woman who's actually certifying Airbnbs and different vacation rentals that are truly accessible, not only for people in wheelchairs or for autism, but also vision and hearing impaired. Mm-hmm. And because a lot of these vacation rentals are self-certifying. And when she went through, say, the offerings of one company, she found that only a very small percentage of the people who said they were accessible were really accessible.
Wow.
So
do they do that because they just don't want to mark themselves as needing more attention than what somebody else might need?
I think that you're talking about the properties themselves. They want to have the business, but I don't think they really understand, many of them, what being accessible really means.
Right.
So she's done a pretty extensive checklist, and the people have to videotape their facilities and show them, like, what's on the ground. Are there lips into different rooms? Because that would be difficult for somebody in a wheelchair. Right. So it's very interesting procedure. And so I wrote all about that on the website as well.
Right. Okay. Because I'm trying to think now, like, from a travel pros perspective, where they're working with a family and having your book kind of like as guidance would be helpful. But especially with, is it
IBCCES is the company that offers the Certified Autism Travel Professional designation. And I believe there are 10 modules that you take virtually. Mm-hmm. You have to do continuing education once you have your certification.
Okay.
There are other companies that are doing certifications as well, but I think they're more for destinations and venues than travel agents.
Okay, because that was going to be the second part, is if we're looking per se in like France, is there somewhere that has resources like this is a really good attraction for people that are a little bit neurodivergent, or you want to stay away from this area? Like, how can people delve in a little deeper?
Well, I have the many destinations in the book. Mm-hmm. So, but I honestly, to be fair, do not have a lot of international destinations. That would be another addition if my publishers give me the go ahead.
Okay.
And there really isn't as much outside of the US and Britain and Canada. There really isn't that I found. I mean, there are some here and there, but the main push that I've seen is in those 3 countries.
Okay. And then when we're thinking about, because I feel like this is a big undertaking for anybody who wants to get into it. So what kinds of advice would you suggest for travel pros who are looking to market to these types of families?
I would absolutely get their designation, because that's going to train them. And it's not a very expensive process, but I mean, I think you have to devote yourself to it. You can't just sort of do it and say willy-nilly and just say, it's one more thing I'll do. I mean, I think you really have to keep up with it. I think you have to really understand that. And that might be speaking to your local community, to the people in your community that have these issues, and asking them, what is it you need? What are you looking for? And really getting to know them one-on-one. And that also can't hurt with your marketing as well, because then you're known to the population, but you've reached out and you've asked, and who's not going to appreciate that?
Right. And I feel like, just because I have a lot of background in marketing, and do enough people know that your business even exists? If you're not meeting your yearly income goals, then probably not. You need more clients, which means you need more prospects, and you can't get those unless you're meeting them where they are. If you're doing things like sending weekly emails and posting to social media, you have put the horse ahead of the cart. So let's put the horse back where it belongs and find opportunities to increase the number of eyeballs on your business by joining the Visibility Collaborative. Search for visibility opportunities, track your efforts, and troubleshoot in community. Head on over to the show notes to learn more and get ready to turn your new prospects into profits. Visibility, kind of putting out value that is of this to this community. It's kind of like when we talk about marketing, you want to make sure that you're attracting the right audience. If you're speaking their language and talking about things like these special sensory rooms, they just get attracted like honey. Like you are the honey, and the flies want to be around you because you have exactly what they want, because you're speaking exactly to them and not just talking about cultured travel or adventure travel or eco travel, whatever it may be.
I think what's valuable in the book is that this is the result of over 100 interviews with not only mental health professionals and these certified autism travel professionals, but parents, allies, and advocates. Not my story at all. So you're able to see from their point of view, because many of the CATPs, as I mentioned, are special needs families or have them. What they went through, what their thinking is, what they tried and didn't work, what their backup plans turned out to be. And so I think that's very helpful, because then you really will learn the language and you will get a sense of the thought process. I think if you do have listeners who have special needs children, this could be a natural, new division for them.
Right. And especially for those that don't really know what to specialize in. A lot of people say specialize in what you know. And if you are actively dealing with that in your family, or you have a close friend, I agree that it does make an easy fit to add that to your lineup of offerings for your business.
Yes. Yeah.
So how can travel advisors, I know a lot of them, especially who specialize with family travel, they do make child-centric vacations, but how does that vary when we're talking about the neurodivergency? Absolutely.
So a couple of the things you have to remember, and again, this can work with regular family travel as well. Not only do you have to introduce them to the concept early, and you can do that either with role playing, you can do it with something called social stories, that if your listeners are interested, they could read about social stories in a book by Carol Gray. But also they can watch videos, because every place has a video that's available either on YouTube or from the supplier. So you can preview every aspect of the trip before you get there. And you and I might think, oh, it's a trip. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. That's so exciting. But that's not great for children, because children crave routine and predictability, and they like the familiar. And so your job is to, as the parent, is to make the unfamiliar familiar to them.
Mm-hmm.
So you can introduce picture books with their favorite characters going through travel situations, or you can create mini experiences. So what I mean by that is I talked a little bit about the airplane and using Wings for Autism, but for a hotel, instead of spending thousands on a hotel stay when the child's never slept away from home, go to a friend's house or a relative's house for one night and sleep there. And you'll immediately see where the triggers are. And you'll see if you need to bring your sheets and blankets from home that have the familiar textures and scent that they're used to, and don't wash them ahead of time so they still have the scent of home. You may have to bring your own toiletries from home. You may have to bring a fan to drown out the noise from the hallway. All this will become apparent to you, and you're better suited, to make your trip and to make it more successful. I had one parent who knows her children will only travel and take baths. So many hotels don't have bathtubs. They just have showers. So she travels with a blow up tub, a blow up pool.
Wow.
And, deflates when she's flying, whatever. She inflates it and she puts it in the bottom of the shower, and the kids can, take a bath. So little things like that are helpful to suggest to clients. But you have to really ask the right questions to the client. You have to say, how does your child react to this, to that? I mean, it's all in the book, what the sort of things you should ask and the sort of things you should know, because you just can't just book it without really knowing the child, because every child is different. So you were asking about child-centric. I'll get back to that. So aside from preparing them correctly, what you want to do is the pacing has to be right. Mm-hmm. And you can't do what you used to do before you had kids. And that goes for neurotypical or neurodiverse. You can't cram 5 or 6 things into a day, Take a longer trip or come back another time, but maybe do 1 or 2 things and then spend the afternoon at the pool, because that's what the child is going to enjoy and remember. And you are trying to have a trip that's for everyone. And if the child's not happy, you're not going to be happy, believe me. Mm-hmm. So the other thing, and I devote quite a long chapter in the book to this, is that children, whether they're on the spectrum or not, often have very specific interests and passions.
Right.
So it might be dinosaurs, it might be trolley cars, it might be rocks or minerals, whatever it is, insects. I've taken those interests and I've broken them down by state, and I'll list all the special interest museums and events that might attract you, so you could include those in your trip. Because if you build the trip around a child's passion, then not only are they going to deal with the more mundane aspects of the trip because they have something to look forward to, but it's going to be a bonding experience that they're always going to remember.
Okay. That's you were saying that, and I wrote down a note. I'm like, what about different ages? So I am not a parent. I am a proud auntie. And I'm just thinking too, how do you vary this, or how do you prepare if there's different ages in the family traveling?
Again, well, it's a good question, because I get the question more of what happens if there's neurotypical and neurodiverse in the same family.
Right. Yeah.
So one of the things, and I'm actually writing a story right now for a exceptional parenting magazine. I'm talking about sports vacations, because most kids are interested in some type of sports. Okay. And there are sports that are adapted for children on the spectrum. Okay. And the beautiful thing about individual sports, there's no team aspect. There's no socialization that's really required, dealing with other people. It's really perfecting your own skill. Mm-hmm. So in the book, I talk about adaptive skiing, golf, scuba, which was a surprise to me, dude ranches, where you can do horseback riding and your interaction will be with an animal. And something that was just brought up to me today, and I'm going to do a piece on surfing. There's adaptive surfing in Costa Rica, which I think is a really cool thing. So again, I'll put that in my story and it'll be on my website. But these are things that if you have a child on the spectrum, they can be worked with. If you have a child off the spectrum, they can enjoy it too. The other 2 things you can think of is there are resorts and theme parks that have had the training. They're certified autism centers, or they're autism friendly. And so children who are on the spectrum or off can enjoy them. Just always remember your noise canceling headphones and sunglasses for children on the spectrum. So even at night, those bright lights can affect you. Mm-hmm. And cruises, The 5 main cruise lines have had the training and have kids clubs that can deal with children who are on the spectrum as well as off. And that gives you the opportunity to enjoy your vacation too, just some one-on-one time with your partner. And also resorts like beaches, which have kids clubs, and they're very highly trained. They're actually advanced certified autism centers. Mm-hmm. So they've gone above and beyond. So that's, again, something you can consider to offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And you had mentioned something about routine, and I know how important it is, especially when my nephews don't stick to a routine. So when people are thinking about planning their itineraries and planning the itineraries for their clients, what do they have to be mindful of, or what questions should they be asking when they're planning these schedules?
Well, you might ask what the child is used to and what the child's routine is. Mm-hmm. You might plan around that. So if there are special activities that you're going to take advantage of, do it when the child is most active. If your child usually sleeps from 2 to 4, you probably don't want to book a tour that's going from 2 to 4. Mm-hmm. But what we can also do is emphasize to the child that vacation is different from real life. And so we can have a different routine on vacation. Mm-hmm. And the book does talk about how to do that.
Okay, good. These are all really amazing tips. It's definitely opened my eyes. Is there something that we haven't touched on that you wanted to touch on real quick?
I think it's important that as a travel advisor, you should tell your clients to go easy on themselves. Nothing's going to be perfect. It's all trial and error. Mm-hmm. You're going to learn, and the next trip might be better. You can prepare ahead of time to ward off tantrums with all the tips, but they may come anyway, and you'll learn from that and you'll go forward for your next trip, but not feeling like because you have a child with an invisible disability that the world's off limits to you. The world is waiting, and everybody deserves to travel.
Yes. And amen.
So you should look into where they can travel and how they can travel. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do. Mm-hmm. The book will come out August 15th. It is available for pre-order now. If you go to travelingdifferent.com, and that's traveling with 1 L, you can find out where you can order it, but it's all the usual places. And I think every bookstore has an online component that can order it for you too. Perfect. And what I would really love is if couple of things. One is, don't take everything I've written as gospel when it comes to different destinations, because certifications change, addresses change, phone numbers change. Do your due diligence and double check all that information before you book your client, or have your clients double check that information. Mm-hmm. And also, if something's listed as autism friendly, find out what that means, because it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different suppliers. Make sure that it's right for your child. If you find a different either strategy or situation that I haven't covered, feel free to email me and add it, because not only will it go on the blog, it might go in the next edition of the book if I do it. And if you order the book, great, but ask your local library to order it too, so people who can't afford it can have access to it.
I love that you mentioned that last bit. I am all about accessibility as well, and making things easier and simpler for the masses. So that is wonderful. So you said that they can reach out to you via your website, Traveling Differently. Is there anywhere else?
It's Traveling Different.
Different. Sorry.
Yes, that's okay. Travelingdifferent.com. I'm on Twitter as Traveling Diff with 2 Fs, because they didn't give me the room to do the whole name. I almost never go on Instagram, but I'm on there as Traveling_Different. And I'm on Facebook a lot. So you can always get me on Facebook at Traveling Different.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here, sharing a little bit of your knowledge. I think this episode was chock full of lots of tips and insights for people that are assisting current clients with invisible disabilities, but also those that are maybe haven't thought about going into this as a specialty for their travel business.
No, thank you so much. And again, if anything you need to pick up, you can get on the website. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And I'll have your website into the show description also, so everyone can check it out there. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, everybody, for listening, and make sure you tune in to next week. Bye. Thanks for joining me on The Strategic Travel Entrepreneur. Please subscribe and leave the show a rating on your favorite podcast platform. Oh, and don't forget to take a look at the show notes for important information and links. See you next week.